Hello everyone and welcome to The Good Old Gamer. So it's time for the big one, guys. So today we're going to revisit the matchup from the Ryzen 7 3700X versus the old Haswell-based Core i7 5960X and see if Max Overclocked on both of these chips and see if the Ryzen can actually compete this time. Because in the last video I did comparing the stock Ryzen 7 3700X, well, it lost, and for me, that was very, very surprising. So you guys were like, hey, why don't you test that one out, overclocked? So that's what we're gonna do here today, but we're also going to include the numbers from our previous video using the Ryzen 7 5800X, and I'm not gonna lie, the numbers here are very, very surprising, so you do not wanna miss this. It's actually so surprising that tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Time or 10 p.m. GMT, I'm actually going to do a live stream to chat with you guys about this because the numbers are just absolutely insane. So without me waffling on too much, let's go ahead and check this stuff out. If you guys haven't seen the previous videos and don't know the specs on the Ryzen 7 3700X, I have them down below, and you can also check out the previous videos. Links are down below. For the Core i7 5960X, the Haswell-E 8-core 16-thread CPU, I have this now running at 4.6 gigahertz. In the last video it was 4.5, but I've also bumped up the ring bus all the way up to 4.2 gigahertz. And this is paired with 8x4 gigabytes, so 32 gigabytes of the Patriot Viper Samsung B-Die memory that I keep recommending. I'm literally putting it in the links of all my videos. If you don't have Samsung B-Die, this is the cheapest way to get some, so I recommend picking some up. Regardless, I have this running at 2667 megahertz, so not very fast. I had it running at 3000 megahertz in the previous video, but this time around we have it tuned all the way down to C11. So 11, 11, 11, 22, 1T coming in at 49 nanoseconds. So very highly tuned RAM on this particular system. And like in the previous videos, I'm using the EVGA RTX 3060 XC 12 gigabyte for the test. Same thing, same configuration. So alrighty guys, let's go ahead and jump right on in. Alright, so as per usual, we're doing these in alphabetical order, so kicking things off with Cyberpunk 2077, 1080p high DLSS ultra performance. We can see here we have the i7 5960X. We're just doing overclock. There's no stock here because honestly the stock numbers would be way too low. It just doesn't matter. Any Intel CPU pre-Kaby Lake, you have to overclock them. They're just not fast enough out of the box. Regardless, this is coming in at 134 FPS on average and 100 FPS on the 1% low. And as you guys can see here, this is actually chart topping in this particular title. That is absolutely insane. So comparing that to the Ryzen 7 3700X, which I thought would be a competitor to this, that's coming in at only 115 and 74. So it absolutely destroys that and even beats the 5800X overclocked. Just let that sink in for a second. We're talking about a 2014 CPU beating AMD's Zen 3 CPU overclocked and tuned. Now, this is just one title, but the fact that that happened at all is absolutely insane. Next up is Far Cry 5. This is at 720p medium, so we're not GPU bound. We can see this is definitely a different story. Cyberpunk is a whole different animal, but we have 161 on average and 123 on the 1% low. Obviously, it's getting its butt kicked by the Zen 3 CPU at this point. However, comparing it to something more comparable, something like the Ryzen 7 3700X overclocked, that comes at 151 and 117. So it wins there. And if we take a look, it's actually pretty much on par with the stock 5800X at 162 and 123. And next up is Horizon Zero Dawn 720p medium. So we have the 5960X coming in at 173 on average and 116 on the 1% low, compared to the 3700X that comes in at 170 on average and 119 on the 1% low. So a little bit higher on the 1% low, but we could say that's probably margin of error. And we can see here with the 5800X stock, that's actually behind. And once again, we have 119 on the overclocked 5800X. So next up, we have the old single thread monster, Starcraft 2. Settings are 1080p high. We can see here we get an average FPS of 279 and 182 on the 1% low. Comparing this to the 3700X, that's 244 on average and 168 on the 1% low. So significantly ahead of that. And when it comes to Zen 3, Zen 3 is in a class of its own when it comes to Starcraft. So it is way ahead both at stock and overclocked. But if we take a look at the numbers compared to something like the 12100, which is also very strong for single thread, it's not too terribly far behind. So ahead of Zen 2, around a 12100, and Zen 3 just murders this game. Next up, we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider 1080p high DLSS ultra performance. We can see the i7 5960X coming in at 158 on average and 117 on the 1% low, compared to the Ryzen 7 3700X overclock. That's coming in at 148 FPS on average and only 97 on the 1% low. So significantly higher there. Looking at the 5800X stock, that comes in at 158 as well on average, 107 on the 1% low. So we actually have another advantage there. And it comes very, very close to the overclock 5800X with 162 and 121 on the 1% low. So only 4 FPS behind. So this is another very, very strong showing for the i7 5960X. On to Watchdogs Legion 1080p high DLSS performance mode. We have the 5960X coming in at 116 FPS on average and 91 on the 1% low, compared to the Ryzen 7 3700X that's coming in at 103 FPS on average and 81 on the 1% low. So once again, we have a significant win for the i7 5960X. And if you guys haven't already noticed, this is another one where the 5960X is chart topping, beating out the 5800X overclocked with its 114 FPS on average. We can call that a tie there. And then we have 87 on the 1% low versus 91. We might be able to chalk both of these up for margin of error, but it's damn close. And the fact that it's even in the ballpark of a 5800X overclocked, that is absolutely insane. All right, and for the final game tested, we have Witcher 3 720p medium, the i7 5960X coming in at 203 FPS on average and 152 on the 1% low, compared to the overclocked 3700X that's coming in at 173 FPS on average and 137 on the 1% low. So once again, a very significant win for the i7 5960X. Comparing this to Zen 3, we can see that we're about on par with the stock performance, which comes in at 209 FPS on average and 151 on the 1% low. So we could basically chalk those two up for margin for error. The overclocked 5800X does take the commanding lead in this particular benchmark. All right, so if we take a look at the 7-game average, once again, we're just taking a look at the 1% lows because, well, honestly, averages don't matter. This is what you feel in games, so this is the most important number. All right, so taking a look at the Ryzen 7 3700X overclocked, we have 113 FPS on average for the 1% lows, compared to the i7 5960X comes in at 126. And if we compare them directly, that comes in at 11.5% faster. So, yep, the results that we got in the last video showing the 5960X being faster than Zen 2 is 100% accurate. When you push these to the absolute limits, well, it still wins. And in fact, it loses to the 5800X overclocked edition here by only 8.7% and ties the stock 5800X. So the 2014 Extreme Edition from Intel is actually on par with AMD's Zen 3 architecture. That's crazy, and it loses by 1 FPS, so margin of error, to an overclocked 12100. So yeah, this thing is holding up very, very well today. Now, if you're not surprised by those results, please check your pulse, because there's got to be something wrong with you. I wasn't expecting that to happen. I wasn't expecting it in the last video. I definitely wasn't expecting this thing to compete with Zen 3. Once I got these numbers, I was like, Paul, Celso, like I was talking with all of my YouTuber buddies. I'm like, check this out. This is absolutely crazy. And I do want to let you guys know I've already done the retesting with the RTX 3090 at 1080p high settings across the board. Some of the games did use DLSS just like here, but I used different settings. That will be coming in a different video with more benchmarks. And these numbers are valid. This was validated. I double checked them. I will do that video in the future. I still have a few more CPUs with this test configuration. We'll get through those, and then we'll move on to the bigger, more broader test configuration. So I do want to let you guys know that. Okay, so now you must be thinking, well, why would you want to bring this up? Well, the main reason why I even bought this was I was trying to find a competitor to the i3 12100. I was like, is there any option out there that might be even close? Well, as you guys saw, this can get very close. Now, the more important part is to get close in pricing. The Intel Core i7 5960X Extreme Edition, which by the way, Extreme Editions will get more valuable in time as they will become collectible. So that's another reason you might want to think about picking one of these up. But right now you can get one for $73.03. Buy it now here in the United States. If you scroll on down a little bit, there's plenty of them around the $80 price point. So whenever I say this is an $80 CPU, you guys can clearly see you have several options to choose from, and you can even get one cheaper than that. So this is actually less expensive than the i3-12100. Now the big pushback on the last video was, well, the motherboards are so expensive. Well, I've got two so far for under $130. We have this one available, but it says read, which means it might have some issues. Typically, just find one around the $150 price point, and you can put in an offer on one of them, or whichever one that you want to go with, and they'll usually take $130 with free shipping or including the shipping. Like I said, I've already got two under $130, so it's right on par with a brand new B660 motherboard and a B550 from AMD. They're all going for about $130. Obviously, this is used, but you get a crap ton more USBs, although we can argue features back and forth. Now, let me be clear, even though this is an amazing performance machine, I would not recommend this over something like the i3-12100. You have a better upgrade path. You have new CPUs coming out later this year that will be usable on the same platform and motherboard. You get USB 3.2 Gen 2. I really hate how they do that, but you can get, the 10 gigabit and you can get the 20 gigabit, USB ports, which you're not going to get on the cheapo X99 boards. Some of the super high-end, like $250 ones, you can get some of that stuff. But in reality, I would still recommend going with the newer i3. However, if you can get your hands on either an X99 motherboard real cheap, or you can get yourself a 5960X for, I don't know, let's say 20 or 30 bucks, you can get crazy good performance out of that, maybe for a backup system or for a friend or for somebody else. So it's definitely usable. You still have M.2 drives. So most of the modern technology will work on here. DDR4 is a big one. So it's not really that big of an issue. But overall, I would not recommend going out and picking one of these up unless you have a specific use case. The X99 platform can be made to work with Windows XP. So if you want to build like a crazy good retro gaming PC, so maybe have like XP and then like Windows 7, Windows 10, and Linux, so you can run whatever operating systems you want, have all sorts of cool stuff in there. There are certain use cases where this makes a lot of sense because it can run modern games very well, and it can also run old games and old software that modern CPUs simply can't. But outside of those really weird use cases, I would not recommend picking one of these up. However, the fact that this CPU can keep up with Zen 3 CPUs should be absolutely mind-blowing to you. And these results really validate the whole reason why I'm doing this video series. I'm trying to show you guys that leaving out context and leaving out the maximum performance of a CPU of any generation is a detriment to us as the community, is because had you known that this was that far ahead, you would have maybe considered buying one of these a couple of years ago when they were maybe $100 or $200 instead of buying something that was $300 or $400 and slower, like a Ryzen 7 3700X. I can't say how much these were when that came out. I don't remember. I wasn't looking at them at the time, but it may have been similar price point and much faster. So this really goes to demonstrate the reason why it's important to know the maximum potential of every single CPU architecture out there. And it really shows how far ahead of AMD Intel really was. Any of you guys remember AMD comparing Zen 1 to the 6900K, which is basically just the replacement for this? Has the same 20 megabytes of L3 cache, and I think it clocks a little bit higher, maybe a little slower, whatever. It's virtually the same chip. And remember when they were comparing that to the 1800X? Well, don't worry, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I want to thank Yubi. He's a member. He went ahead and sent me his 1800X. I got it to 4 gigahertz. I got it to 3200 megahertz on the RAM. I got it to CL12. So I'm literally giving Ryzen the best chance possible. It's not even close, guys. It's not even the same ballpark. But yeah, you remember that? And nobody really challenged AMD's claim on that, going, no, you're off by like, I don't want to give it away, but a lot. You were not even in the same ballpark when it comes to gaming. But I remember that wasn't challenged a whole lot way back when. Maybe I missed something. I do remember some of the 6900K or the 6950X reviews showing that CPU, which is the 10-core version of essentially what I just showed you, that losing to a basically a stock Skylake 6700K. It's pretty clear that it should not lose if things were properly done and benchmarks were run right. So hopefully the scope and the reason why I'm doing all these tests are becoming clear to you. All of this is done for you guys and by you guys. So you guys are the backbone. You guys are the sponsors. You guys are the ones supporting all of this. And if you want to join in and you want me to add more CPUs, I'm just going to make a giant list. I'm just going to keep throwing them on there. We will refresh with the higher games list with the RTX 3090. So this way you guys can be like, okay, it's on the level. Even though the numbers here are good and they do line up, I want to basically eliminate any sort of argument possible. But if you want to help support and get all this stuff on hands, it's not cheap, guys. These aren't that bad, but getting some of this stuff on hands is expensive, especially a very powerful graphics card. I could borrow one from my buddy. I would rather have ones on hand so I can do the testing whenever I want, instead of bothering him like every few days going, hey, can I borrow your 3090? I need to run some tests. So if you want to support and you want to join the community, you can do so by clicking the little join button down below or going ahead and clicking the Patreon link in the description down below. Just a couple bucks a month, skip eating out one day or skip, a coffee at the gas station or something. That's all it really takes. And it helps out a lot. You get access to the Discord. You also get access to Paul from Non-Apple Fans Discord. We have a deal where, you join one, you get the other one. So you can do that as well. And you also get to ask questions on the Techonomics podcast and get access to the exclusive after hours that we do. So you get all sorts of benefits, but my favorite part is just chatting with you guys and getting you in there. And I really do appreciate all your support. I'm super excited to keep testing all this stuff. I do want to thank Denver. He sent over the 5700G, got that in today, so we'll be adding that. Tons of stuff coming up. I've got a lot of CPUs already done, a lot more to go. And yeah, I hope you guys are really enjoying this. I'm having fun doing it. Hope you guys have yourselves a great day, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.